Well, the last time we spoke, you were with your cello gang at Peabody.
Yeah.
But now you're sailing solo with music of Brahms.
Yeah.
And for folks who don't really know, I want to create a sense of the history that has gone into this album. You're playing on the cello that the great Pablo Casals played himself. He also had a history of actually performing in front of Brahms. Mm-hmm. There's so much going into this. So maybe you can set the stage by just giving listeners a sense of the importance of Pablo Casals in the 20th century and beyond as a musician.
Yeah, well, Pablo Casals, for us cellists or for classical musicians, is, as we like to say, the grandpa of classical music in the 20th century. I mean, so many of us were influenced by him, violinists, cellists, pianists, you name it. He was also a great humanitarian. He left Spain into exile in 1937 because of Franco and refused to go back until the regime changed. In fact, stopped performing and helped a lot of refugees. He was very involved as a person with the matters of the world. Pablo Casals was born in 1876 when Brahms himself was already quite an elderly man. When he was 12, when Casals was 12, he played for for Brahms. And Brahms, as we all know, died in 1897. But Casals carried on that tradition of knowing he was a good friend of Saint-Saëns, of Fauré, and many other composers. So he was a link between a living line between the end of the Romantic period, the end of the 19th century, into the 20th century. And luckily for us, he lived to be 97 and died only in 1973. So he lived through the 20th century, but also a big chunk of the 19th century. And it's really amazing. So luckily for me as a cellist, my main teacher, Bernard Greenhouse, founding member of the Beaux-Arts Trio, was a student of Pablo Casals. And in many occasions in the lessons, as any teacher would quote his teacher or his influence early on, Pablo Casals quoted Brahms.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things in this sonata, a lot of the tempos, a lot of the musical ideas, a lot of the dynamics, decisions were made or were given to me by Greenhouse and were given to Greenhouse by Casals, who heard it from Brahms. And that makes the line really alive.
Yeah.
So when I today teach these sonatas to my students, I can go back to Brahms himself with some of the quotes. And this is an amazing feeling. Now, of course, talking to a student in a lesson is very special, but putting it on a CD is even more special, because then the general public can get a taste of that, what I like to call free walk on a firm ground that was so common in that time.
I love stories like this because many people who listen to Brahms think, oh, this music is so old, so long ago.
No.
But there's really a line of succession that you can draw between Brahms and yourself. You're sort of like the musical great-grandchild of Brahms.
Yeah, it's true. And then to put even more special feeling into this recording, I'm using the cellos that Pablo Casals himself played and recorded those two sonatas. So it puts, of course, pressure on me, but also it's a very special feeling as an artist to have that same instrument that Pablo Casals used to record those two sonatas. That makes this whole cycle, and that's why we call the CD To Brahms with Love, from the cello of Pablo Casals. And I feel like just the driver here. Of course, I hope I have much more to do than just to drive it, but we wanted to make the connection between the instrument, Casals, Brahms, and this amazing music that we all love. But we wanted the people, the general public, to see the connection through the cover of the CD, but also to hear it through the cello.
Tell us briefly how you came into possession of the instrument for folks who may not know.
Well, about 6 years ago, I was fortunate to get to know and to play for Mrs. Casals, the widow of Pablo Casals. She's still alive. She's in her 80s. She's an amazing person, a legend by herself. She used to run the Kennedy Center, the Manhattan School of Music, and she resides now in Washington. And a mutual friend arranged for me to play for her. I arrived in her apartment and I prepared some pieces on my cello. I started with Bach, which I thought would be a good thing to start with for her. And after playing the prelude, the first movement of the first suite, she stopped me and she said, Amit, I usually shut my ears off when I hear a young artist, but I didn't do it when you played. Mm-hmm. And I was really shocked and honored. And I said, oh, thank you, Mrs. Casals. This is a great compliment. And she said, well, would you mind if I give you some comments? And I said, no, it would be an honor. And then she basically killed me. She just turned me apart. She asked me, why are you doing this and why that, and you should listen to this and you should do it like the maestro, as she referred to her late husband, and so on. But then she said, play more. So I played more, and then the same process killed me. After an hour of playing from Bach to Dvořák to Brahms to Chopin to you name it, the entire cello repertoire, she said, Amit, let's have a glass of wine. So I didn't refuse, of course, and we had wine, and I sat next to her, and I'm myself 6'5". I'm a sort of a giant, and she is a very petite woman. She looked at me and she said, the maestro was a small man, and you're a big guy, but if you want, you can come to my New York apartment and try his cello.
Wow.
So that was it. And I said, of course I want. Yeah. And I went to New York a couple of months later, and I tried the cello. And that was really it. I honestly never thought that this cello would get out of that apartment and be available to the world again. So I was in heaven. I thanked her, and I left, and our mutual friend told me, Amit, she's from a different generation, so you should write her a handwritten letter to thank her. So I did.
Yeah.
I wrote a letter, and 2 weeks after that, I got an email back from her saying that she really appreciated it, and she would like to hand me the cello, to lend it to me so I can share it with the world. And that's what I've been doing in the past 6 years.
Oh, that's wonderful. And you've been sort of recreating concerts of Casals, have you not?
Yeah. So what Mrs. Casals said was two things. She said, I want you to share the legacy of Pablo Casals with the world and his cello, but I also want you to find your own voice through it. Mm. And I didn't really get that in the beginning. Voice, of course, could be my cello voice on the cello, which was hard to find, but I could find. But voice is really who you are. And I have gone through a process of asking myself, who am I as an artist? And I found through this cello and through the inspiration of Pablo Casals that what I love doing is to share music with as many people as I can, and not necessarily just in big concerts hall. And the programs that I like to share are programs that are more accessible to the public, are not this kind of boring 3 big sonatas that you play in a concert and then everybody falls asleep by the end.
Right.
So I went back to what Casals himself played in the early 20th century when he made his career as a performer. And I was shocked to find that that's exactly what he did. He played programs that were mostly shaped as a good meal. There was always a short piece in the beginning, like aperitif, 10 minutes, and then a big piece like a steak, like a Brahms sonata. And then second half was all desserts, was all show pieces. And I started recreating those programs just to see what it does to me as an artist, but also what it does to the public. And guess what? No wife had to kick her husband with her elbow to wake up at the end of the concert because they were standing on their feet.
Yeah.
And they wanted more. So I realized that it's not only to find my voice through this cello, it's to find what classical music used to be back then. And it used to be entertainment.
Let's talk a little bit about the Brahms sonatas in particular. It's kind of fun because you can go back to YouTube and pull up the recordings with Pablo Casals playing that first sonata. And I was flipping back and forth between his version and your version, not listening to how you perform it, but listening to the sound of that cello, because it's the same cello, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's sort of like the Technicolor is turned on. All of a sudden you can hear all the overtones that you wouldn't hear in the original recording.
Yeah, well, we have to remember that an instrument, it's a piece of wood, of course. And of course, these days we have better equipment to record. So you're right. Maybe one can grab more of the overtones of the instrument, but also the setup is very different. Pablo Casals used to play on gut strings. And it was a different kind of method to record, of course. But when I go back to listen to that recording, which I grew up on, it's not necessarily for the quality of the sound, but it's what that cello made Casals do. And many people ask me, do you really hear a difference when you play this cello? And my answer is, it's not that it makes the public hear something different, but it makes the artist play in a much deeper way, because it allows you to find colors that you didn't know that exist. So that the whole timing issue of how to play this music or any kind of music is different than any other instrument. It's like riding a good old Rolls Royce that might make a little noise, but will give such joy to the driver who collects those cars that it will put that driver in a different state of mind. And when you go to art, it puts that artist in a different state of mind, and it gives you a chance to go deeper into your subconscious and to bring out from the music much more emotions. So I think when I hear his recordings, I sort of know Casals as good as I can without knowing him as a person, because the time he takes and the liberty he has with dynamics and the beauty of his vibrato, his decoration, his left hand, is so gorgeous and so evident, at least for me as an artist, as a cellist, that I think now playing this cello, I know that this cello helped him, and that's why he loved this particular instrument. It helped him find those qualities inside him when he played this music.
Well, and that becomes more clear when you hear, for instance, when I go listen to your recordings with that cello, and you have that sound in your head, because that actual cello has a kind of a dark, rich sound, which you hear immediately at the beginning of the Brahms Sonata number 1.
First of all, thank you, because I hope I have something to do with it. But that's exactly, if you ask me what a cello sound is, that's exactly what I love about cello and what I look from a cello sound. So this like dark chocolate, warm, thick is what I love about cello. And if I would be a singer, I would try to get that sound for my voice. If I would play violin, I would try to get the sound for my violin. And, I have this example with Perlman. Perlman has, I think, the most beautiful violin sound, but I got to know him a little bit, and hearing him speak or sing, it's the same voice. And it was the same with Greenhouse. There's only two people that I felt that found the connection between their voice and their instrument sound. And I think when Marta Casals told me, go and find your voice, was to allow me to take this cello to where I think cello sound should be. So when you say that the cello sound very dark and thick and warm, I take it a little bit as a compliment for me, because that's exactly what I'm looking for with this cello.
Well, it was definitely meant as a compliment.
No, I know, but I think it's important for the listeners to understand that we artists are not just playing the cello and bringing out what the cello has, is we are taking this cello and making it part of our body. Yeah. And making it our voice.
How has playing that cello changed you as an artist? Has it affected how you play the instrument?
Very much so. I think now, because of necessity, because I had to, this cello forces you to be much more relaxed. When we play music on a wooden instrument, we cannot be tight physically. It's actually the same as sport. I mean, you cannot be an athlete and not get wounded. I mean, look at LeBron James being 33 and still going even better than before. Look at Roger Federer. Look at Michael Jordan in his days. I mean, people who know how to use their body, their craft allows them to get to heights that we didn't know that exist. It's the same with instruments. When you know how to treat it and how not to disturb it, it will bring out much more from it. And I do it in concerts. Sometimes I demonstrate to the public what happens if I play the cello the same way, but I press my lower back up and I sit upwards with a tight lower back. It changes completely the sound of the cello. And if I lower my back and I bounce it and I let it go, it makes this, what you say, warm and full and beautiful sound. When people see that in front of them and hear the difference, they're shocked, because it's the same cello, but it's the cellist that is different. So this cello, being so sensitive, it's like, Formula One, this race car. When the better the car ear is, the more you can do with it. So if you're a great driver, you know exactly what to do in order to turn it in 280 miles per hour, where we don't even think that it's possible to turn a car. Same with a cello. If you are a really good cellist and very sensitive player physically, you can sense the instrument, and you can really, by changing angles of your body structure, you can change the sound of it. And I have never had an instrument that allowed me to do that so much. So that taught me a lot about the fact that my body is my Stradivarius and not the instrument that I play.
Yeah. Well, this recording is a wonderful opportunity to hear that cello and to hear you play it in full glory. Those two Brahms sonatas, which incidentally are separated by a couple of decades, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of them was written in a summer vacation, the Opus 38, the E minor, in a summer vacation where Brahms spent the entire summer with Clara Schumann. This is a few years after Schumann died, and I really feel that this is a dialogue between Johannes and Clara, and the piano part with the pushing up beats is really Clara saying to Brahms, "Oh yes, I love you too," even though we don't know if that happened, but a composer can write whatever they want.
Right.
Whereas the Opus 99, which is very similar in time to the Third Symphony, it's a much more symphonic piece. So, when you teach the E minor, when you play the E minor, the first sonata, it's about the dialogue between two people that are in love. When you play the Opus 99, the F major, you are conducting the Berlin Philharmonic. You are Karajan, and your instrument is this amazing orchestra, and you're imagining different instrumentations playing at the same time. So for me as an artist, it's a very different approach between a dialogue into this polyphony of amazing colors of an orchestral performance.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, the name of the album is Two Brahms with Love, from the cello of Pablo Casals. That's from cellist Amit Peled and pianist Noreen Polera, right? Yeah. And she's done a lot of work with you in the past.
Yeah, Noreen is a wonderful friend to begin with, and we get along very well, and we tour a lot around the world. And as I always say, when you go into a recording studio, you're going to give everything that is inside you and you didn't even know that exists. So you want to do it with a person that understands you. There are moments when you just start screaming and you hate the engineer because they want you to do again and again a certain part, and you think it was good enough or musical enough. And it's a very intense environment. So you don't want to go into that process with somebody you don't really like and appreciate artistically. And Noreen is definitely a person I like and appreciate a lot artistically.
Wonderful. Cellist Amit Peled, thank you for joining us and sharing this album with us here on FM 91.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.